Hello and welcome. This is Wilrens for Create a Learning Site, the place to go deeper in your understanding of the Bible. Hi there. So, Toledot, what's that? Well, we're going to deal with Genesis and with structure. To define the structure of a book, we may have more than one valid option. Sometimes a different way of looking at it opens new insights into meaning and message. This is certainly true for Genesis. A widespread and conventional structure for Genesis divides it into two parts, although the exact location of the main break is arguable. Is it Genesis 12 verse 1, where God speaks to Abraham for the first time, or is it Genesis 11 verse 27, where Abraham is first introduced and where we also find a structural marker? I prefer the latter option for reasons that will become clear in what follows. Each half falls into four parts. In Genesis 1 through 11 we have four events: creation, fall, flood, and tower building. And in Genesis 12 through 50 we read about four people: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. So far so good. I have nothing against this combined topical and biographical structure, but here I want to write about a different structure based on a peculiar Hebrew word, Toledot. Toledot is a plural noun related to the verb that means to give birth, to beget, or to father a child. The ESV translates 34 out of its 39 occurrences in the Old Testament with generations. Although this is slightly misleading, we should not think of Gen X or millennials. Rather, what is meant is offspring or descendants. In Genesis 2 verse 4, Toledot is used for the heavens and the earth, which of course cannot have descendants, so there it appears to mean something like that which was begotten or brought forth. Now, Toledot may be used to introduce a genealogy, when the phrase is something like the Toledot of person X. However, 3 or 4 times in Genesis, the phrase actually introduces a narrative rather than a genealogy. We have the Toledot of the heavens and the earth in Genesis 2:4. We have the Toledot of Noah in Genesis 6 verse 9. Arguably, since it does mention his sons in 6 verse 10, we might sort of treat this or look at this as a genealogy of one verse with a narrative appended. Then Genesis 25 verse 19, we have the Toledot of Isaac. No trace of a genealogy there. Genesis 37 verse 2, Toledot of Jacob. Likewise, no trace of a genealogy. In these cases, we are perhaps to think of that what proceeded from, rather than offspring. That what was accomplished or done by a person and his descendants. Interestingly, the Septuagint, the ancient Greek Old Testament, uses the word Genesis for Toledot, which has given us the name of the book. Although it's not actually the correct idea or translation. Toledot does not refer to the origin of X, which is what Genesis means, but to what X brought forth, to what came from X. Now, that aside, how does this help in reading Genesis? Well, the term Toledot is used as a structural marker in the book, introducing a new section. In total, there are 11 occurrences of the marker, although 2 of these serve to mark the same section. Genesis 36 verse 1 and 36 verse 9, both passages about Esau. In other words, there are 10 sections, 5 in each half of Genesis. And the occurrences are as follows. In the first part of Genesis, we have the Toledot of the heavens and the earth, Adam, Noah, the sons of Noah, and Shem. And then in the second part, we have the Toledot of Terah, Ishmael, Isaac, Esau, and Jacob. Now, a few comments. First, this explains why I prefer to see the main break at Genesis 11 verse 27 rather than Genesis 12 verse 2, because there's no structural marker there, as there is here in chapter 11. Then second, some interpreters think Genesis 2 verse 4 really is the conclusion to Genesis chapter 1, the first creation account, rather than the introduction or the title of chapter 2. However, in several cases, the function of the Hebrew phrase can only be to introduce what follows, not what to conclude what went before. This is the case, for instance, with the genealogy of Ishmael and with the genealogy, the Toledot of Esau. It certainly does not serve as a conclusion there. And it makes perfect sense that Genesis 2 verse 4 introduces the account of what the heavens and the earth brought forth once they had been created, in parallel to the descendants brought forth by the human characters in the book. So, by all appearances, Genesis 2 verse 4 is also an introduction and goes with chapter 2. And then third, in the first half of Genesis, the marker introduces 3 sections that include substantial narrative. We have creation and the fall, following Genesis 2 verse 4. We have the story of the flood, following Genesis 6 verse 9. And we have the table of nations, together with the Tower of Babel, in Genesis chapter 10. The remaining 2 sections, introduced by the marker, function as connectors from Adam to Noah in chapter 5, to Noah and his sons, I should say, and then from Shem to Terah in Genesis 11 verse 10 and following. Other than this, there does not appear to be much of a pattern here. The pattern is different in the second part of Genesis. Here we have 3 main sections, interspersed with 2 much shorter ones listing the Toledot, here the descendants of Ishmael and Esau. Important to notice is that the Toledot of Terah is almost entirely about Abraham, not about Terah. And the Toledot of Isaac is almost, it's mostly about Jacob, not so much about Isaac. And then the Toledot of Jacob is actually more about Jacob's sons than it is about Jacob, with a special emphasis on Joseph. We have 3 main sections instead of 4, as in the conventional structure. We're now left with Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph, or Jacob's sons. In this structure, the story of Isaac is subsumed under that of Abraham. Isaac gets substantially less space than the other patriarchs, and much of it repeats or parallels events in the life of his father, Abraham. Genesis 37 verse 2 and following, the third section here, the third long section here, is often referred to as the Joseph narrative, but that is a bit of a misnomer. After all, Jacob is still around and plays a role of importance, almost until the very end of the book. And although Joseph takes central stage, other sons play a role as well, especially Judah. Think Genesis 38 and 44. One could therefore think of Genesis 12 verse 50 as really containing only two main narratives. The story of Abraham with Isaac, and then that of Jacob and his sons. But then, if this is so, what is the point? Well, each part conveys a very different message. Okay, that is enough PowerPoint. Doesn't work too well for storytelling anyway. So we have two parts. Part 1, Genesis 12 through 24, gives us the foundations. Abraham does not show much development, neither does Isaac, whose story largely consists of parallels to the life of his father. In many ways, at the end of his life, Abraham is the same person he was at the beginning. Sure, he has believed and obeyed God's voice, and he has stood the test of time and of costly obedience. But to a large extent, the story is more about God making a commitment than about Abraham. It is about the foundations of promise and covenant. The rest of the Bible flows from this beginning. And then we get part 2, Genesis 25 through 50, which shows us transformation. God is still the main character, but Jacob and his sons show substantial development. At the start, Jacob is not a nice guy, quite different from likable Abraham. Think of it, who's your favorite character in Genesis? With whom do you identify most? Your answer may well be Abraham, but it's not Jacob, am I right? Already at birth, Jacob shows his character. He is born holding Esau's heel, which gives him his name. Jacob means he takes by the heel. But in Hebrew, it is also an idiom meaning to cheat. Nomen est omen, the Romans used to say. Sure, you know the story. Jacob gets Esau to sell him his birthright. He cheats his father to obtain the blessing. Nevertheless, when Jacob runs for his life, God commits himself to Jacob with a strong promise. Ever the deal maker, Jacob makes a conditional commitment. If God will do all these things, he will be Jacob's God, and Jacob will return to this place, to Bethel, to worship. Jacob continues to Aram and falls into the hand of an even greater schemer than he is, his uncle Laban. After many years, he makes a run to escape, but only succeeds because God forbids Laban to hurt Jacob. And then comes the hardest part. He must now face Esau. Finally, Jacob is at the end of his resources. He still tries. Several large gifts are sent to sway Esau, who, it turns out, does not need to be swayed. The night before the brothers meet, Jacob wrestles with God. And that night, at the Jabbok, is Jacob's decisive breakthrough to a new identity. Although the old Jacob is still alive and will show from time to time, he now also is Israel. After this, Jacob purchases a plot of land near Shechem. Apparently he aims to settle down. He even builds an altar there with a very pious name. But that was not the deal. What about Bethel? This cannot go well, and indeed trouble erupts. Dinah, his daughter, is raped. You may know about the vicious reaction of Levi and Simeon. They murdered the entire male population of Shechem. What is often overlooked is Jacob's dismal behavior. What does he do? Nothing. One wonders, Dinah is Leah's daughter, the unloved wife. Does this make her less important to Jacob? Simeon and Levi's are Leah's as well. Dinah is their full sister. Does Jacob's passivity provoke them even more to revenge? The only thing Jacob does, after the fact, is complain about Simeon and Levi's action. But the complaint is not that what they did is unjust or out of proportion. He fears the response of neighboring Canaanites. He is concerned for his own safety and well-being. And so, again, Jacob is in a tight spot. And again, this gives God the opening he has been waiting for. God said to Jacob, "Arise, go to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." The implicit rebuke is subtle and severe at the same time. After all, Jacob had settled near Shechem to dwell there. He had built an altar there, not in Bethel. And God says, no, not this way. There is a reason for Jacob's reluctance. To go to Bethel, he has to put away the idols present in his company. He does this now and then fulfills his vow, a changed man. At this point in the story, the focus shifts to the sons of Jacob. They do not look promising. Reuben sleeps with Bilhah, Jacob's concubine. Joseph turns out to be the younger brother you really do not want, a total pain in the butt. His brothers are ready to kill him, but then in a last-minute reversal, Judah persuades them to sell him as a slave, since that is more profitable. And Jacob, the cheater, gets cheated again, this time by his sons. He mistakes the blood of a goat for the blood of his son, of Joseph. And then he chooses to wallow in his grief for the rest of his life, refusing to be comforted. He makes a choice. Judah, meanwhile, goes off and wanders on the Canaanite side of life. You can read Genesis 38 for that ugly story. Now, Jacob has made all this sibling rivalry worse through his blatant favoritism. First toward Joseph, then toward Benjamin. But God isn't done yet. Although the process is long and Joseph pays a high price, he comes out the savior of his family. And when he puts his brothers to the test, it turns out they have changed too. They will not leave Benjamin to himself. Judah especially stands out, this time positively. What we get to see in Genesis 25 through 50, and this is half the book of Genesis, is God's persistence in dealing with and changing his very fallible and imperfect chosen ones. Jacob is emphatically not the same person at the end of his life as he was at the beginning. The same can be said of Joseph and Judah. I suspect it is also true for the remaining sons. They have grown. They have become better people. In the end, they are more godlike and therefore more truly God's people. This is what God does with persistence. Although he may wait for long times until we are ready to hear him, he won't give up. And let's face it, we all need it as much as Jacob, Joseph, and Judah.
Show will be starting in just a few moments. Thank you for your patience. The show will be starting in just a few moments.